Hello, dear authors and invited guests. Welcome to Technical Session 2D. Good morning to one and all. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the 6th International Conference on ICT Sustainable Development for through Zoom on behalf of Team ICT Forestry 2021 and the Global Knowledge Research Foundation. We are thankful to everyone present on this platform to go along with us digitally for this conference in these unpredictable circumstances of COVID-19 and making this conference more productive. Also, we wish everyone and their families protected time and we all will together pass this soon. We hope you will enjoy 2 days of the knowledgeable and interactive sessions. Before we get started, I would like to introduce you all to the chair for this session, Dr. Prashant Dhotre. Dr. Prashant is an associate professor at Department of IT, JSPM's Rajarshi Sahu College of Engineering, Pune. He has over 17 years of teaching and research experience. He also serves as a reviewer for these various journals. And now I would like to introduce our next session chair, Ms. Ruchi Nanda. Dr. Ruchi Nanda is working as an associate professor and research supervisor in the Department of Computer Science and IT at IIS Jaipur, India. She has actively contributed in teaching and R&D from last 17 years. Her areas of interest and research are in big data, cloud computing, machine learning, and database. And she is also remote center coordinator of spoken tutorial IIT Bombay and add-on courses in web design and technology at the university. Thank you, sir, and thank you, ma'am, for sharing the session.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to start out with our first presenter. Divyani Bamre. Paper title is Detection of Swine Flu System Using IoT and Machine Learning. Divyani, are you there? I think she's not here right now. So can we move forward for next presenter, ma'am?
Excuse me, sir. Am I audible? Sir?
Miss Devyani?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, Miss Devyani?
Sir, I'm Sagufa Parveen. In the previous section, while giving my presentation, the automatically the Zoom meet was ended. Am I allowed to give my presentation now?
Ma'am, I think we have
to conference secretary. He allowed us to talk to you, and he only told
Okay.
us that we can give the presentation in this session.
Okay, no worries, ma'am. You can start your presentation, please.
Thank you so much, sir. So my screen is visible.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
So are we audible to sir? To you, sir?
Yes.
So extremely sorry that it got interrupted in the previous session. So we have to do it. So it will be real quick. So this work is based on a sensor, which is distributed fiber Bragg rating sensor used for temperature sensing. And we have tried to assess whether it can be used to detect the fires which occur in underground coal mines due to a host of exothermic reactions. So this is the outline, introduction, problem formulation. What is the proposed method? And this we have done by simulation using OptiSuite 16.0. The results obtained henceforth, conclusion, future work, and references. And as we can understand, detecting fire in an underground coal mine is an important task. And due to various exothermic reactions, due to self-ignition, fires occur, and then it becomes important to detect those. Though there are a host of temperature sensors available to detect those, but they come with their own problems. Here we have tried to use a fiber Bragg rating sensor in a distributed and multiplexed configuration to detect the fires. So the sense temperature as a function of the central Bragg wavelength, it can be transmitted through two channels, in optical fiber cable channel or a free space optic channel. And out of this work, the contribution of this twofold. We have tried to demonstrate a 8-channel wavelength division multiplexed fiber Bragg rating temperature sensing mechanism. The second is we have tried to figure out the performance differences between the sense data acquisition when they are transmitted over an optical fiber cable channel and a free space optic channel. And this is the problem formulas that the wavelength which can be sensed by the fiber Bragg rating sensor, lambda b is a function of the effective refractive index and grating period lambda. And this fiber Bragg rating, the simplicity is it can be constructed out of a single mode fiber by inscribing periodicities through ultraviolet mechanisms. And the change in periodicity or the ineffective, that is the refractive index, will give a sense of the temperature. And further, this effective refractive index is a function of the optic coefficient zeta, which we evaluated in some previous work. N is the actual refractive index, which gets changed upon sensing a temperature, and delta T is the change in temperature from the ambient conditions. Henceforth, the change in wavelength with respect to temperature is given by this formula 3. And what we have tried to figure out is when we sense, when we subject this fiber Bragg rating to a white light, it will reflect a part of the light, lambda b, and the rest of it will be transmitted. Now, depending on the temperature range, which part of the spectrum gets reflected, that is lambda b, will give us an indication of the temperature being sensed. And for just to give you an idea how it looks like, this is a sensor commercially available with this kind of technical specifications. And as we can see, this is suitable to be used in this wavelength range 1500 to 1600 nanometer, which is correspondingly the wavelength of 3G optical systems. And this is what also we have used in our work. Henceforth, my colleague Sagufa will take over to tell you what is the work that we have done and what are the results we have obtained.
So the schematic has been designed using an OptiSystem 16.0 simulator. Here we have used 8-channel WDM FBG WDM system. Here 8 different fiber Bragg rating sensors are used, which have different temperature allocated, and the reference value for the input, which is a white light source, that is nothing but an optical spectrum having a central frequency as 15 nanometer, is given input to this fiber Bragg rating sensor. And the output of this of the sensor is nothing but a central Bragg wavelength, and the and 8 different temperatures sense data are multiplexed by using a WDM multiplexer, which then the sense data can be transferred to a single channel. Here we have used a wired channel, that is a optical fiber cable channel, and after in the receiver side we have retrieved all the wavelength by using a WDM demultiplexer. This is the close view of a transmitter side. Here the white light source is nothing but the optical spectrum. When the optical spectrum is given in the input to the FBG sensor, if any change with the temperature, this will reflect a central Bragg wavelength, and it will transmit rest of the wavelengths in the transmitter side of it. Means in the reflection, the central Bragg wavelength is reflected back, and in the transmitter, except that wavelength, rest of the wavelengths are transmitted. Here this is a system for by using this FSO channel, that is your free space optic channel. The free space optic channel is very much similar with your optical fiber cable. The only difference is that the optical beams are transmitted in free space. Means in the free space optic channel, there is a transmitter and a receiver, and the transmitter and the receiver should be in off line of sight, and only the transmitter will focus the optical beam to the receiver. And this is the result after the WDM multiplexer. Here we can see there are 8 different wavelengths we are able to retrieve. The central wavelength that we are transmitting is 1.55 micrometer, We can see with the change of temperature, we tried 8 different wavelengths in our WDM multiplexers. So this is my results. Here I have taken my reference voltage as 0 degree centigrade. Sorry, reference temperature is 0 degree centigrade, and we have differentiate 8 different temperatures are inserted in the FPG sensor, and accordingly we have find out the Bragg wavelengths. The theoretical Bragg wavelength is find out by using the formula that has been shown in equation number 3. And similarly, the simulated values for OFC and FSO channel has been find out, and the required graph has been plotted between the change in temperature and Bragg wavelength shift. We can see from the graph that the theoretical shift in the wavelength is very much similar with the simulated OFC shift of wavelength by using OFC and FSO channel. One more thing we have included in it, we have increased our transmitted power that has been given in the input of our white light source. We have increased this to minus 30 dBm to up to minus 10 dBm. With the increase of this temperature, we have find out the range of sensing through this through this optical fiber cable and through FSO channel. And from this, we have find out that minus 130 dBm, with the minus 130 dBm transmitted power, we are able to detect our sense data in OFC channel with 75 kilometer, and for FSO channel.
Dear author, sorry to interrupt you, but you have last 1 minute. Please conclude your presentation.
Yes, okay, okay, sir. So from this, we conclude that our multiple FDG sensor can be located in different location of your coal mine and able to detect the temperature change. And from this, we can, by using an FSO channel, we can completely omit the use of optical fiber in a coal mine by only deploying it with a wireless channel. And with the increase in transmitted power, we are able to detect the sense data from OFC channel. OFC channel is 465 kilometer and FSO channel is 320 kilometer. Also, with the very low transmitted power, that is minus 130 dBm, we are able to sense the data. And the input source, that is the white light source, it is really of very less cost. So it is very feasible to use in our system. So basically here, all the schematic has been done in a simulator. The basic establishment of this FPG sensor and FPG WDM sensor system has to be used in a proper coal mine area, and different communication channels, different parameters of this communication channel can be improved, and also different sensors are different optical sensor can be used for testing of different parameters for coal mine fires. And these are my references. Thank you for your patience. Queries? Yes, do you have any queries? So am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are audible.
Prashant sir, Ruchi ma'am, any questions for presenter?
So, sorry, sir, unable to hear you.
Ruchi ma'am, Prashant sir, if any
Hello?
questions for presenter?
Yeah. One question. What are the parameters which help you to increase transmission range?
Sorry, sir.
What are the parameters which help you to increase the transmission range of OFC?
What are the parameters?
Basically, we have increased the increased the transmitted power, and we have tested for increasing the frequency.
So the
of
two
this.
parameters which can increase the distance is the transmitter power in the first place, as we increase it from minus 130 dBm to minus 10 dBm for two different channels like OFC and FSO. the temperature, the distance range have been shown to be increasing. From some hundreds of kilometers, it can go up to 460 plus kilometers for the OFC channel, and increasing the transmitter power from minus 130 to dBm to minus 10 dBm can increase the distance up to 320 kilometers for the FSO channel. So this is the only parameter that we can make use of to increase the transmission distance.
Okay, thank you.
And we thank you also, sir, for allowing us to make the presentation complete. Thank you very much.
Now move forward to our next presenter. Aishwarya R, and her paper title is Model for Intrusion Detection in Cyber Physical System to Address Network Simulation.
Yes. Share my screen. Okay, is my screen visible? Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Welcome everyone. So myself Aishwarya and my co-author Ajita and our project guide is Dr. Shirley Oliver. So we are going to present about the model for intrusion detection in cyber physical system to address network simulation. So the abstract is that network security has become very common in today's world, like both in personal and business. Everywhere we use networks for in every sort of work, but that too in today's COVID world, everything has become virtual and everything is connected virtually. So networks has become a backbone of everything. But however, by increasing networks has also increased the vulnerability in that, like the cyber physical systems are like more interdependent, and new vulnerabilities arise every day. Like they are more suspected to failures. Also, there are more increasing number of cyber attacks such as denial of services, attacking SQL injections, etc. So our proposed system is to detect any failures such as traffic flow or DDoS attacks, and also classify the attacks using random forest classifier. That is to build a model to do this classification and detection. So the main project objective is to build a model for the intrusion detection in the networks using the random forest classifier, which could be deployed in any of the cyber physical system networks. So our build model just detects and classifies the attacks and traffic overflows in any logical network area. That is, if we give any logical network data into the model, it would give the result of the same. So these are some of the related works which we gone through for our paper. Like the first paper which we gone through was a realistic model for failure propagation, in which they have proposed a model for the failure propagation to detect the failure propagation interdependent power and communication networks using the HENT model. The next one was the next paper was the cascading failures in interdependent systems, in which they have studied about the impact of degree of variability and the dependence of the interdependent system. Also, they have also explained clearly about the impact of the 2003 blackout, which has happened in Italy, due to which a large losses were happened, which blackout was happened in the electric grid system networks. Also, the next paper was the enhancing failure propagation analysis system, in which the authors have clearly said about the impact. The authors have clearly explained the importance of understanding the impact of failures in order to produce in order to resolve it later. So the next two papers were the survey on attack of estimation control of industrial cyber-physical system and the security assessment for interdependent heterogeneous cyber-physical system, in which they have talked about the recent security advancements in the intrusion detection and cyber-physical systems. Also, the last paper was the intrusion detection and cyber-physical system techniques and challenges, in which they have made an effort to discuss how different approaches can be applied to develop an intrusion detection mechanism. So our proposed system uses network data which we have collected through the Kaggle and to the open source, and also which we have collected through a virtual network simulation, and builds a model using the random forest classifier. Classifier which detects and classifies the various traffic flows and denial of service attacks. So advantages of the proposed system is that it could make the cyber-physical system more secure, and also it detects the bugs and any type of attacks in the system. Also, this can be formulated in such a way that it could be deployed easily in any form of logical network. So these are the system requirements. And coming to the system flow, initially we take the network data and pre-process the data and build an ML model using the random forest classifier algorithm. And after the building that model, now if we give any sort of data, like any sort of the network data, it would detect for any vulnerability present in that data. And in case of any vulnerability, it would detect and classify the data and give the result of the same. Else, it would just give that there is no vulnerability in the given network data. So these are the tech stacks we use for that and the modules. So for initially for the data collection, we used the collected the data mainly from the open source Kaggle API DDoS dataset, and also in order to get some real world network data. So we used a Python Mininet framework along with Telegraph and InfluxDB to collect some ICMP traffic flow data, in which we simulated a basic virtual scenario for the denial of service attacks and traffic flows, and just collected the data into the backend using the InfluxDB and Telegraph plugin. So the CPS framework is nothing but the general physical networks. Like it can be, these networks can be of any type: transportation network, healthcare network, electric grid network, etc., which is widely recognized and have been used in various sectors. And these are the backbone of every networks. Like every network can be classified as the cyber physical system. Any networks connected to a physical system is called as a cyber physical system. So pre-processing of the data. So pre-processing is mainly done to remove any garbage data and also to remove any unwanted anomalies or abnormalities in the data. So we used some process to remove the null data and anomalies from the data, like which data, and remove some columns from the data which are not necessary for the model. Like it would be like it would make the model to overfit or underfit the model. So we just remove that model using the pre-processing of the data. And vulnerability and intrusion detection, this comes the main module of our system. Like we used the random forest classifier to build the model. Initially, after pre-processing of the data, we just splitted the data into the train and split test data, and using the train data, we build the RFC model using various feature selection and principal component analysis process. And after building the model, we just download it as a pickle file and try to just use it in a user interface where we could give various types of network data, and it would just give a result as like whether any type of attack has happened in the data, like any type of attack would have happened and what type of attack would have happened in the data. So conclusion is that we just have proposed a realistic model for interdependent fiber physical system, which analyzes the network data and predicts any types of vulnerability and also classifies the same. So security is the main security is the main factor in cyber physical system and also in any sort of network system in today's world. So that should be we aim to do a model so that it could be used in the network, logical networks, to protect the data coming in and flow out of it. So future works is that we have now analyzed it using the random forest classifier. Like in the future we can also do some precise feature selection and use the neural networks for better results. Also we can get some more data by virtual simulation in order to use it in neural networks, and also it could be made as a plugin which could be just used in any sort of logical network for the detection of vulnerabilities. So these are the references that we used. Thank you. Any questions? Hello.
How much data set do you use?
Okay, the data set consists of around like 15,000 columns records.
15,000. And
Yes.
how much for training and testing?
Okay, we have used 80% of the data for training and 20% for testing.
So how you have done this pre-processing of data? Have you used any particular tool for that?
Yeah, basically we used the Python libraries for pre-processing the data.
And what about the feature selection?
Yeah, also like we use the min-max scalar and sklearn in Python to do the feature selection and principal component analysis.
Okay, okay, fine.
This project is also a part of the UG final semester project. Any
Okay.
other questions?
No.
Have you measured the accuracy?
Okay, the accuracy of our model currently is around 87%.
No, have you measured?
Okay, like how we made that, like we just analyze the accuracy using the correlation matrix and various other like metrics.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving forward to our next presenter is Deshna Sachan, and her paper title is A Review of Adaptive and Intelligent Online Learning System. Dear presenter, you may please start your presentation. Don't worry, Deshna, you can present your paper after this presentation. So can we move forward for our next presentation?
Who's presenting next?
Yeah, just give me a second, sir. So our next presenter is Himanshu Dutt, and
Okay,
his
fine.
paper title is Analysis of Marketing Mix Website Performance and E-Marketplaces of Agriculture Products.
Thanks. I'll just do. Am I audible by the?
Yes, you are.
Very good. Hi, good evening all. Let me just share my screen. Visible now?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thanks. So good evening, everyone. Right. So I think I've been following a couple of presentations earlier, and I think this is the odd one, right? Because it focuses more on the marketing and management side of it, less of the technical side of it. So I'll just quickly start since I have 8-9 minutes, 7-8 minutes. Okay. So the title is Analysis of Marketing Mix and the Website Performance. So the both marketing mix and website performance, what impact collectively it has on the e-marketplace of agricultural products. Now, this study specifically is being done in reference to Indonesia. Right, that's where my other authors are, and this project is being funded by Government of Indonesia. And this is a small part of a larger project that the team is doing. So just to start with an overview, we talk about e-marketplace. So the components are there should be some product. The product would be a download service also, or a otherwise a service as well. And then other physical products which you can see, look, tangibility aspect of those, right? Intangible, tangible. Then there should be a website that should be there. We talk about that there should be transaction mechanism there, which is commonly known as e-commerce. And then we talk of multi-channel, where the buyer seller have a lot of people, in fact, the resellers, platform providers, transactional platform providers, which are basically wallets, UPI banks, and platform provider in the sense that, Amazon, which encourage people to use their platform and sell from there and earn commission on those. Similarly, we see a lot of the Facebook building up the marketplace, right? So these marketplaces are being recognized in the world, especially in the times of COVID, where the restrictions are there, people movement has been restricted, shops are shut. So a lot of people are actually by force they are moving towards the e-marketplaces, right? And that is how the adaptation is happening slowly. Now, globally, if you see the fundamentally 47% of e-commerce sales, nearly around 2 trillion USD in 2020 was there, right? So COVID, I already said that, because of the COVID, there's a surge of 35% people opting for more online transactions on online orders. So this surge has been there in Indonesia for last 1 year. And in fact, not Indonesia, it's globally the trend. Amazon.com globally, well, I mean, the footfall has been more than ever. The traffic used to be about 3 billion, and now it has crossed 5.2 billion, which is, increase of about 18-20%. It is increasing on an average globally. I'm talking about. Then the top 4 categories on e-marketplace basically are fashion is the number 1, and then comes the book, homewares and electronics. And the agro-based consumption is very minuscule. It is less than 5% if you see the transaction value, which is less than 5% of total annual sales globally. I'm talking about. So especially in the Asian context, it is less than that, but on an average globally, it is 5.7% for the top the global giants. So when we talk of online marketplace, we talk of the availability of agricultural products in those contexts. So now these availability of agricultural products can be fast without any brokers in between, which is called middlemen, with less probability of the items perishing, because but yes, of course, it will attract the high logistics cost in that way. Yes, but which is internal to the firm, so the firms can manage it. But overall, if we see the value proposition is that there is a less annual sales or purchase happening over the website in Indonesia, which is less than 5% of the total annual sales the top 5 websites do there. So that is how the proposition is there, and we are trying to understand that why this issue persists, why people are not encouraged to buy more than vegetables and fruits on internet. Externally, this has to be seen from the organization's point of view, those who are manufacturing, marketing it, right? So from their point of view, it is the marketing mix that will be required, and what kind of marketing mix that they should have, which have some impact over the purchase decision for people. So the present situation, I'll just summarize. Agricultural, like India, it also contributes about 15% to the annual GDP of Indonesia, and which is second to the information and largest sector, contributing after the information and communication sector. Almost same contribution Indian agricultural has, sector contribution to GDP has. COVID restrictions we already talked about. It has fueled up the growth of marketplace, and a lot of products people are moving towards online marketplace. There's a paradigm shift which we have never seen before. Although the markets were rising because of the internet push, because of the data cost going down, the data revolution coming. So a lot of things are happening, but still, if you see on the agricultural products on the digital platforms are still not very famous. So 1 out of 6 grocery seller have some kind of agro produce in Indonesian market. There is a growing bandwidth, better internet users are being added. So 13.63 million new users were added last year to the Indonesian internet users market. Now this is all fueling growth, but COVID have done tremendous, have fueled the growth like anything. So this growth have actually almost near to doubled in terms of the traffic that websites are receiving. Now, there are companies like Gojek, which are very popular in Indonesia. These food delivery giants, they are increasing more penetration of competitive products, including the agro part of it, by increasing more food categories and making more transportation and payments, enabling the payments from their own gateway, and doing the competitive transportation cost. So this is how the situation is, but still this is not favorable when it comes to buying or selling agro products on Indonesian e-marketplaces. Now there is a role of marketing mix which affects the purchase decision, right? And this purchase decision to have the right marketing mix to push agro products in the right direction for the people to purchase, we need to understand some part of it. So digitally, the consumer landscape is changing. It requires some skills. People are acquiring those skills, especially children's. The devices they are having, devices are low cost devices to a high end models. Everything is there. Bandwidth, cost, affordability has gone up. The convenience it has, it saves time, right? And then there is some other part of the product which is not there in as an internet user, where we see significant challenges. For example, particularly in vegetable and fruit buying process. So you cannot touch, so you don't know what kind of fruits will be delivered, what kind of vegetables will be delivered, or what kind of the agro product commodities that you are talking about will be delivered to you. And then there are some factors about the website itself which makes the process a little more complex. For example, what is the ease of navigation, how the user experience should look like, the pricing happens, the download speed, quality of interaction, how much effort do the people place on your website to locate the product they want, what is the visual appeal the product has, right? And the single sign-in login processes that we are seeing right now, for across the websites and apps. So these are some of the challenges which are changing the consumer behavior landscape like anything. And these elements can have positive and negative impacts. These elements also can alter the purchase decision significantly. For example, will the customer adopt? Will he come for the repurchases? So these are some of the questions which the internet poses with respect to the marketing mix that companies formulate to create a visual appeal for people to think of whether to purchase or not. And for farmers, it is the challenge is basically they find it very hard to find a online marketplace and registering themselves and doing the business, which is more convenient to them in terms of selling their products in a local mandi or a physical marketplace. Now, what did we essentially do? So we try to go deep into the marketing mix variables, where we saw there are 6 P's: product, price, the promotion part of it, and then how they are being placed in the market. What sort of evidence is there, whether their website is good, bad, it exists or not, do not exist. It should not a fraud. It's a good website to do business with or to transact with. And then the process, that how much time it takes for the delivery to come. So all those sort of features. And then we compared it with the performance of an e-marketplace. So basically we are saying that the marketing mix combined with the performance of the e-marketplace. Now the e-marketplace, the variables are what features it has, what is the kind of content it has, to pull the people, create that appeal where the people should come, the awareness it should make, and then the convenience part of it, where the people have the ease to navigate. They put less time, less effort in locating the product that they want. So we wanted to see if there does the marketing elements of marketing mix and the performance of marketplace have some sort of impact on the agriculture product.
Dear presenter, please conclude your presentation. You have 1 minute.
Okay, I'll speed up. So to buy the products, agro products online or do not buy. So this should be the decision that they have to take, and this could be a make or leave sort of value proposition. So quickly, I'll just come down to analysis part. So we did some test. F-test was conducted. We saw what kind of variables have what kind of impact. So basically, just to summarize, the test explains the partial test and the simultaneous test that was done on the data. It explains that there are 2 major critical factors which have the largest impact, as much as 44% on the purchase decision consumers have when they are looking for the agro products online. And these 2 categories are promotion and the physical evidence, which means evidence of existence. So they know that this website exists, one, and how this existing website is promoting themselves in terms of the content, visual appeal, and all those advertisements and promotions. So basically we found that these 2 are basically the most important factor which are contributing to the largely fueling the purchase decision. The other are not that relevant. Performance, which means features, content, and convenience of online marketplace, also did not have any impact on the purchase decision. So primarily, we saw from our sample that promotion and evidence of existence of an e-marketplace is the most important thing. And then just to conclude, I would say the entrepreneurs, agro entrepreneurs, hence need more focus on promotion and physical proof of website existence. These are the most critical elements that are influencing the purchase online for the people who are looking at buying agro produce. Then these customers can review the website. They can get on to know more about the marketplace offering. This is the first step for the agro entrepreneurs to be there, right there. And then COVID is a nice time for them to transit to the physical to online, right? Even if it is being forceful, but then you have to tap the blue ocean rather than when the market hots up and then it becomes red. So so the time is now. The opportunity is now to grow it there. Promotions don't boast big mile and mostly an expenditure factor, but yes, promotion is a big expenditure factor. We also got to know this, not many people are promoting their website as they want or they wish to, but largely they are, with COVID restrictions in place, they are also pushed back in terms of, purchasing, putting more expenses to promote their websites or to do sort of discounting promotions, but it is very essential for these days now to attract customers and engage them. So overall, what we are saying that there's a big scope enough for agro producers and sellers to expand this market from less than 5%, but it actually is now to at least fairly to let's say a growth of 7 to 10% now. So that's it. My time is up. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please do ask.
No questions from my side.
Okay. Thank you.
Can you go to the title of the slide?
Which one? Slide number?
The title. Slide number 1. What type of analysis you have done? There are different types.
So we did descriptive analysis basically. So descriptive analysis, but I would not say it was purely a descriptive, but because we ran some simultaneous test, F test and ANOVA, right, to understand how the marketing mix variables interact with website performance, and they collectively affect the purchase decision for agricultural products.
Okay, thank
so
you.
Basically exploratory study.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Any further questions, or I can close down?
That's all from my side.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, our next presenter is Kaushal Bhavsar, and his paper title is Detection on Insider Threat Based on Forensic Analysis of Windows.
Okay, thank you for giving me my presentation slot. I am just going to share my screen. So my topic is detection of insider threat based on forensic analysis. First, I'll try to explain what an insider threat is. So in this figure, you can see the dotted line is basically an internal network of an organization, and the external attackers or hackers are the ones in the red ones who can try to attack the organization from the outside, but there is the firewall or intrusion detection system which stops these kind of attacks. We have already seen a similar research paper earlier, but there are certain threats which are inside the organization, like this blue person sitting over here. he is basically an employee of the company, but he is inside the organization and he is able to access the organization's information directly. So the firewall is not able to detect or stop these kind of attacks. So this is my area of research. And I, I did literature review for certain things. So Tim Lloyd's case in 2003 was a benchmark for the insider threat, where an ex-employee planted a virus into the organization before leaving, and it destroyed the entire company 1 month after he joined another job. And since then, this thing has been a subject of research. There's a good documentation and guidelines and a book by CERT US, which shows what kind of parameters an insider attacker will display. And there has been a several research work which has been done in proactive monitoring of the organization's information systems for identifying insider threats. So this paper is a part of my complete research, where we collect and process the activity data from the person, and we predict whether the person will turn out to be a threat or not. But while doing this research, we actually identified a research gap. And the research gap was that in case we do not have any kind of monitoring system, it is not possible to predict or even detect the threats. So even our research had a limitation. We had an agent which we would install. It's like a sensor application that would be installed on the computer of the person, and it would record all of the activities which are be done. But we encountered certain scenarios where um, there was no agent installed, but the insider crime was done. And that's why we wanted to go out with a system that would be rather reactive, that would um, be of any kind of use after crime was done. And that's how we came onto this research. So the objective is pretty simple. We analyze the forensic artifact from the user system, and we identify whether that person is a threat. Now, this is a very tall claim to say, because just because someone has done some suspicious activity does not mean that he is a threatful person. And that's why instead of using something like a blacklist or whitelist or something like that, we used an approach of scoring, assigning a score to the person. It's a numerical value which will suggest whether that person is a threat or not. And the system architecture is pretty much straightforward. We take forensic information from the Windows registry, and we also have certain scoring rules, which I will show in the next slides. Um, we generate a session timeline, that is what are the activities that a person has done once he was logged in into the computer, and then before he logged out. Also, we also record the IP addresses and the timestamps of the login activity, because that will help us um, you know decide further parameters, so whether the person was a threat or not. And we get that information from Windows event logs. So the data collection is done in basically three sections. First part is the session activity, which is the login and logout events that have been registered into the system along with the username. So if one computer has got multiple user accounts, we are able to um, just identify the login logout events. Um, we are also able to see the applications which have been run into a particular duration of time period, and we bind that time period with the session activity, which is identified here to, as well as we are also able to identify the removable media activity. So we have a complete record of the USB disk along with the model, the capacity, storage capacity, as well as the serial number. And in that way, we are keeping a track of all of the USB disks which have been connected to the system, as well as the applications which have been executed while a particular person was logged on to the system. And these are certain registry locations in which we are getting all this information. It is encoded, but well, the information is completely easily accessible over there. Um, in order to store everything into something which is parsable and understandable, we have determined an XML file, and I am explaining the logical structure of the XML file here, where the root entity is an event, and that root entity will have several things like the user account which was logged on during that event, the timestamp of the event, if there was a particular path for that particular file, then the file name, and then again the type of the event, whether it is a network connection event, file access event, USB access event, or a program execution event, along with the login IP address. Now this is just a logical view, but we store this into an XML file for easy reviewing and interoperability with other systems. For the data processing, we just created a simple Python script which will be able to create a collection of all of the events based on the sources of data that we have already mentioned here. Um, what we do is we have an event blacklist or whitelist database which will identify whether an event is suspicious or not, and if it is there, then it will be recorded into the session. Otherwise the system will go in and start collecting more and more events. Now they all would be coming from the registry or the event log. So this as I mentioned, it's completely reactive. It is based on all of the events that have happened in the past. And the limitation of this thing is that we are unable to identify the actual large amount of data, because the registry stores only limited information over there, and that's why we were not able to collect a great data set for this. But in our test environment, we were able to simulate certain events. um, Once the events have been identified, we have created a threat score matrix. Now this is basically just a knowledge engineered data set. What we do is, for every event we are assigning a particular score, and based on the chain of events that have happened during the login session of the particular user, we are able to give a particular threat score to that individual session. So we have every activities, every different kind of events which we have lined up here, connecting to a new network or connecting to an unrecognized network, accessing a network share, accessing a file with confidential information. Now to get this, we need to have a list of confidential keywords of the organization. In the same way, executed blacklisted program. In this case, we have to have a list of blacklisted programs, and these are all custom dictionaries that would be added according to the scenario, as well as logging in and logging out, um, etc. Okay, so I will just explain a couple of scenarios that we have identified. Scenario 1 is about exfiltration of sensitive data
Yeah,
where,
sir, please conclude your presentation.
yeah, thank
We're
you.
running out of time.
Yeah. So in this case, the employee of the company was taking confidential company information into their private USB disk, and we can see that the score for this is 165 based on the score of each individual event. And similar thing is remotely accessing the network from home, where the person remotely logged in outside of shift hours, and at that point of time the threat score was 140. Now this number would not mean too much, but if we are able to calculate a threat score and compare it with the activity that a person was currently doing, then we are able to understand the patterns in the person's activity usage. So as I mentioned, this is a part of a larger research, and certain future work is testing this system on a very large data set, because we can take advantage of various machine learning techniques. We also want to test the accuracy of this thing with a proactive user behavioral analysis system, where um, we are also taking the forensic data as well as the live data, and we're comparing to see whether the person is actually a threat or not. And then our system is currently limited on the Windows platform, but we want to go ahead and test it on a multi-platform. So that's how about it. These are a list of references, and that's all. I conclude my presentation. I'm open to any questions if the audience or panelists have.
How threat scores you have calculated? You have mentioned threat scores, how you have kept.
So, ma'am, we have used the DREAD model, DREAD, and it's basically a well-known scoring model which is used by security companies to quantify um, unknown threats. So we have used that.
Okay, how you are planning to get this large data set you have mentioned there?
So currently we are working with certain organizations for implementing this system in their infrastructure, and our test environment had only 10 computers, but in a larger enterprise where we have got more than 200 employees, so we wish to get more data from that. The challenge is that since it is like a very confidential organization information, we do not get direct access to that, and there are no open data sets available. Uh, Hopefully, if we get access to something, we might want to release that data out in the public domain.
Have you approached somewhere for that?
Yes, in fact, companies are approaching us for that, but um, I have to, wait for my PhD thesis to be completed before I go into any kind of commercial agreement which they are proposing.
Prashant sir, have any questions for presenter?
No questions from my side.
So move forward next for our presenter.
Thank you, sir.
Our next presenter is Desna Sachin, a review of adaptive and intelligent online learning system.
Sir, am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Is my presentation visible?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, my apologies to everyone. I had some network issue. And good evening, everyone. And I'm here with my presentation of my review paper titled as a review on adaptive and intelligent online learning system. So as we know what is an online learning system, and it is like online virtual and network environment that in which teachers and learners they participate from different locations, and it is a platform where people can learn without having any kind of physical barriers or time variances or anything. So as we see the current scenario of COVID-19 pandemic, we see that all the educational institutes were shut down, and the only medium to learn a desired course was through opting an online course. But there is a wide variety of courses available online, and the learners usually face problem in selecting the most appropriate course for them, because every learner has a different learning style, a different knowledge level, a different content preferences. Therefore the adaptive and intelligent learning system is proposed. So before understanding the recommendation, okay, there are two parts of this research work. The first is the recommendation system, and second is the learning techniques. So first of all, let us understand about the learning techniques. So the adaptive and intelligent online learning system uses the learning techniques to find which course or which kind of course content that suits the learning style of the learner or their level of understanding or their knowledge domain. And the intelligent learning system is the part where which helps teachers to monitor and provide the customized feedback to each learner in a more efficient manner. So adaptive learning is the capability of learning system to adapt itself according to the student or the learners based on their information or their requirements, like whatever their content preferences is, or whatever their knowledge domain is, or their learning style. So this adaptive system has three main components, and they are the domain model, the user model, and the adaptation model. Coming further to the intelligent something that provides a very customized and a very appropriate feedback, because mostly we see in online courses that students are not given proper feedback, and therefore the learning process might not be that efficient, or the learner might not learn that efficiently. So the third part is the adaptive and intelligent learning system, which is the combination of adaptive hypermedia and intelligent learning system. I would just explain in briefly what adaptive hypermedia is. So hypermedia is basically a non-linear medium of information that includes graphs or videos, audios, plain text, or hyperlinks. So adaptive hypermedia is something that adapts itself according to the user model, or according to the user's preferences or his or her learning style. Basically, in our research work, we are focusing on the learning style of learner. Next is the recommendation technique. So recommendation techniques is the information techniques by which we predict, or which is used to predict the item that suits the most, or the item in which the user is most interested in. Because as I said, there is a wide variety of courses available. The user is not interested in all the courses. There are some specific courses that he or she might be interested. So this is where the recommendation techniques are used. Coming further to the types of recommendation techniques, so we are using the three recommendation techniques named as the collaborative filtering, the content-based filtering, and the hybrid filtering. The collaborative filtering is the one that filters information by using recommendations of other people, which means that if there are two similar users, that is the user 1 and the user 2, and the user 1 and user 2 likes product 1 and product 2. If, say, user 2 likes another product 3, then system will automatically recommend the same product to user 1 because of their similar nature. This is how the collaborative filtering works. Second is the content-based filtering. And in this, what happens is if a user reads a book A, then the system will recommend him or her another book B of the same genre as book A, which means of the same, we can see that the content recommended is of a similar kind. The third is the hybrid filtering. The hybrid filtering is the one which is a combination of content-based filtering and the hybrid collaborative filtering. It can be combined in any way, like making the content-based decisions first and then combining it with the collaborative-based decisions, or the vice versa. Coming further to the problem formulation, as education is the vital part of everyone's life, and there are the current scenario we are just facing right now, the COVID-19 pandemic, we are very much dependent upon the online courses, and sitting at home and deciding what or where to learn. It is not very much feasible to just opt the first course we see, because it might be overwhelming in starting any course we see. But as the course moves further, the learners usually skip the course or do not continue with the course because they do not they are not completely satisfied with that course. So in these cases, the learner should be recommended with a course that actually suits their learning ability, their knowledge domain, and as our main focus is the learning style of the learner. Second, in online learning systems, the monitoring and evaluation part is not very good these days, because the learners are not because one-to-one learners cannot be monitored one-to-one in online courses. So there must be a system, an intelligent system that monitors them one-to-one and provides them a very customized and evaluates them. And basically after evaluation, it just adapts itself to enhance the learners if they lag behind somewhere. Coming further to the objectives of my research work, and the objectives are to divide the courses into a level of difficulty, work on identifying the learning style of learner, and use different recommendation modules to suggest user the course or course content as per the learning style. Literature survey. So the papers included in the literature survey are presented, and the first paper is adaptive learning framework. And in this paper, the author used Felder-Silberman learning style model and index of learning style questionnaire to recommend the course or course content to the learners. Basically, the Felder-Silberman model is the one includes 4 learning style dimensions, and index of learning style contains 44 questions with 11 questions of each dimension of Felder-Silberman learning style model. The learners were asked to answer those questions, and based on the answers, the learning style of the learner was identified, and hence the course was recommended. The second paper is the adaptive online learning design using Moodle. So in this paper, again, the learning style of the learner was identified, but the author made 2 evaluations, that is the formative evaluation and the summative evaluation. The formative one was done during the course process, and the summative evaluation was done after the course ended. And there were 2 testings involved to improve the capability of the learning system. The 2 testings were the alpha testing and the beta testing, in which the alpha testing was done at the developer's end, and the beta testing was
Dear
done.
author, sorry for interrupt you, but we have 1 minute left. Please conclude your presentation.
Okay, sure.
You can just conclude. Let me speak. Just a minute. You can just tell you have conducted review of literature, right? And this is your review paper.
Yes.
You have identified the works which have been already done by the researchers. What limitations or the future work you have identified in these papers that you can take up further for your research?
Yes, ma'am. This is the future work, as you asked, the limitations. So as I told that in identifying the learning style of learner, in all the papers I went through, the learners were asked to answer a question, and based on those questions, the learning style was identified. But there are very wide chances that learners might not answer those questions honestly, or since there are 44 questions to answer or 35 questions as I saw, 35 or 44 is a very large number to answer the questions, and if those questions were not answered properly, the learning style would have not been identified in a proper way. Hence, the course recommended would not suit them. So this was the first limitation. The second limitation was that the learning style of the learner, it is a kind of sentiment analysis which changes with time. So we need a system that continuously like with every course learner goes through, or with time to time, there must be an analysis which identifies the learner's learning style with time. It should be updated dynamically. So this was the second limitation. The third limitation that I went through was not limitation, actually the future work that I used in my work was not just identify the learning style by the questions, but also by the learner's behavior. For example, how much time he or she spends in reading a page or an article, or how much time he or she uses to answer a question. So these things are the learner's behavior, and these can be used. Apart from this, the one more thing that I used in my work is that identifying the knowledge level of the learner. So this can be identified by, for example, we can give a basic test or a basic analysis test, we can say, can be given to a learner, by which we can identify if the learner claims that he or she has a basic knowledge of certain course. We can give him a course test to identify that he or she actually has that basic knowledge. So these are the few limitations, and there's something new that I thought of implementing in my work.
Can you cite the authors
Yes, sure.
for these limitations?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you
Ma'am.
tell me the authors from which you have identified these limitations?
Yes, ma'am.
Authors?
Ma'am, as you can see, the paper number 7, the Mubaraka Sani Ibrahim and Mohammed Madha adaptive learning framework. In this paper, only the learning style was identified on the basis of the answers that learner answered those 44 questions. So we cannot be sure that learner answered all those 44 questions in a very concerned way, or means we cannot be sure that learner is answering them very honestly, or is answering means this is not an efficient way to just identify. In this paper,
Right,
I
right.
found this drawback.
So you are able to identify it, but just put these things in your slide, because I think this may be part of your research. So this is very essential part, that with each paper, while reviewing the papers, you have to identify the limitations, or don't give the word limitation. You can give the word remarks or future perspective
Yes, ma'am.
with each paper, so that it will be easy for you to justify the proposed model for your research.
Okay, ma'am. Sure.
Okay,
Thank you so much, ma'am.
interesting topic.
So our next presenter is N.N. Kamble, and the paper title is Use of Blockchain Technology in Agriculture Domain.
Good afternoon, all. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I'm sharing my screen. Is my screen visible to all?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for giving this opportunity to present my paper. I am Nisha Kamble. I'm a research scholar. I'm doing my research from MIT WPU Pune University. So this presentation is to present my paper. The paper title is Use of the Blockchain Technology in Agriculture Domain. So there are various literature or researchers have done research on various models where we can effectively use the blockchain technology in various sectors. So out of that, I have chosen this agriculture domain, where I can show you like couple of advantage of the blockchain model usage. So organization of my paper is like this. So I started with abstract and then introduction, where I mention about the small summary of the overall paper, which is followed by literature review, where I selected some 10 papers which are detailed out very high level synopsis of each of the paper. I have detailed in the literature review. Then it goes to observation, like what I observed during reviewing all these papers, and based on that I did some comparison analysis as well for all literatures, and based on that some conclusion that I have made, that is also I'm going to present here, and the references. This is the organization of my paper and also the presentation as well. Okay, so this is the abstract, and it talks about a little bit about the blockchain technology. So as you know that blockchain was invented like a decade before, but still it was known for the cryptocurrency only. But nowadays it is coming as a solution provided for various problems in various sectors, and moreover it is really giving as a solution for the supply chain in various domains. And the earlier implementation of the application was a traditional way, like there was some user interface, the business model, and the database. So most of the time we are getting the traditional way of implementation, where the centralized database is mentioned or is used for any of the implementation, but blockchain is giving some new era of implementation where we can have a decentralized, completely new concept of the decentralized database, where we can have the database stored in a very secure way, and immutability also can be happen with this decentralized database. So this literature study paper is completely focusing on the agriculture domain in the supply chain. So I will be like focusing on various supply chain like food, fruits, vegetables, seeds, how the various models can be effectively used to improve on the traceability, security, and performance. Various good literature I gone through so far, and out of that some of are really interesting to know. Some new concept that we are getting to know here, that big chain database, that is something new that was proposed by, or that was written by the author Feng Tian, and there the author is mentioning about a combination of blockchain and decentralized database, and that is a new database that is getting proposed, and that is for improving the performance, improving the scalability, and all other factors. Also from safety angle, like blockchain itself is various like having safe environment, but still activation key, that is the new concept that is getting introduced within the blockchain by one of the author. And yeah, third one, the one more paper which is having a very interesting concept of blockchain and SQL database. The combination of both can be used in a very good manner for improving the performance, efficiency, and from storage aspect as well. So very good papers that I will be sharing with you now within this presentation. Also, it is observed that blockchain with IoT can make it more robust, where we can remove or avoid the human errors while entering the data or getting the data within the any system. So this is very high level overview of the blockchain. There are much more thing on the blockchain, but this is very crisp thing that I'm trying to consolidate on this slide. So this is definitely coming as a very good technology, and it can be used for improving the traceability from end-to-end life cycle of any of the goods, we can say. But here we can say from agriculture more, that from farm to store, how the traceability can be improved. Who is the seller, who is the buyer, who are the middle layer that acted on that particular product. That also can be completely traceable using blockchain technology. So typically blockchain is a digital ledger where all the records are stored in the like each of the transaction is stored as a record in the blockchain network itself, and that is a decentralized database. So whoever models or whoever nodes are activating or participating in that particular flow or the process are called as a nodes of the blockchain. So everyone is knowing that what data is coming, what data is transacting, and all that. So everyone is having all information with themselves as well. But this data is very well secured, because all the data is stored in a hash manner. So it is not like straightforward record that anyone can read and like modify in a simpler way. So there is the hacking or the tampering of the data is very possibility is very low using blockchain. That's why the data is immutable. That is what we call. And data security is very high, because digital authentication is also achieved, or that is in place in the blockchain technology. So yeah, let's talk about agriculture domain a little bit, like what are the current issues and all that. So as everyone can know that agriculture is the backbone of the Indian economy or any economy, and mostly for the Indian economy, majority of the GDP, that is 17% of the GDP, agriculture domain is participating on that. So definitely farmers should get a proper mechanism for their managing the agricultural land or during their supply chain as well. And since like there are various laws are in place, there are various systems, there are various procedures are in place from the government and from the various technology, but still we are finding some of the issues. Couple of them I have mentioned here, that many of the time that the information is not shared across the department. That is what we see, like in supply chain normally. There are various organizations participated in a single supply chain model. But data sharing is not so transparent, data sharing is not so good. There are always some loop and holes. And to breach that loop and hole, this blockchain can definitely be a good solution of that. That is what I learned from all this literature reviews. The centralized, there is a centralized database for supply chain, wherever we see a computerized system for the supply chain.
Dear
And
ma'am,
that's,
sorry to
sorry?
interrupt you, but we have running out of time. So can you please conclude
Okay.
your presentation?
Yeah, sure.
You can directly come to your work, how you have applied this thing and what is the model you are going to propose and what work you have done.
Yeah, ma'am, this paper is about the literature review. So I'm just explaining about the various literature and what is their takeaway from the various literatures. So this is the key slide, I would say, where we can have a comparative slide, comparative analysis for each of the paper. So these are the 10 key paper. I learned, I studied various paper, but out of that, these are the 10 paper where the detailed study has been gone through.
Very good.
And all are very recent papers, you can see. The first paper is about, like, again, this is a blockchain-based solution. That is a cloud-based solution where we can get a file-layered system, where again, traceability or transparency and the performance was the key focus during this paper explanation. This paper provides the complete detailed design of that model. So one can learn that design and take away from that, okay, what needs to be done and what cannot be done and all that. Also, they mentioned that they have used some sensor for the data collection, but at the end they mentioned that if we are using IoT for the data collection or for the processing, then definitely the human error can be much more reduced for the data collection as well. So that is the first paper about. Second paper, again, the blockchain solution, and that is a specific use case. That is for the soybean seeds flow. How the supply chain for the soybean can be managed using blockchain. So this particular solution is again a detailed design which is based on the Ethereum and using the smart contracts. This is a really good analytical design, I would say, and design model as well, which gives very good transparency from end-to-end cycle, like from a farmer to how it can be customer, how the supply chain can be managed. So that is what it is mentioned very well. But also there is some limitation that still they yet to work upon that. That is the payment delivery. That is still automated. Right now, they have just mentioned about the payment delivery with a very basic model, but they want to enhance that further on that. Fourth paper is again the analysis of the existing agriculture issues that we are facing, and they categorize that very well. They use Delphi mechanism using the by their literature review itself, and they categorize that very well. And for each of the solution, how the mobile application can be a solution for that. That is what they explain very well, but the technical details are not available much in this particular paper. The fourth paper, which is again the blockchain-based solution. Again, it is for the food supply chain for end-to-end. The solution has been built on Ethereum, and they are providing solution on both actually, from Ethereum and Hyperledger Sawtooth as well. And finally, they compared these two solutions, and then they said that Hyperledger is the more effective solution compared to their performance and all other factors. So that is what the Hyperledger is the recommended technology to build this blockchain solution.
Are the factors same in the papers?
Sorry?
Are the factors they have considered same?
Yeah. Yes, they are having the agriculture domain only, but some are talking about the seeds, some are talking about the food, some are talking about the fruits. So
Performance parameters I am talking about.
So you can see the feature column there. So many of them are talking about the traceability, because that is what the missing thread in the supply chain as of now.
but many of them are also enhancing their model by performance, security, and all those models. So the sixth paper, the listed sixth ranking paper here is the blockchain-based solution. Again, it is the good guidance based on the 13 enablers. They are calling that as enablers. They are focusing on traceability, decentralizing, immutability, privacy. All these enablers, how you can effectively use while working on or building your solution in the blockchain. The seventh paper, which is again the Feng Tian, which I mentioned about the big chain database, which is combination of the decentralized database and this blockchain database. And that is what they come up with a new terminology, that is a big chain database. And they also reviewed their paper or verified their paper for hazard analysis. They mention about various security risk hazards and how the big chain database can be better solution over the same. That is what they mention about this paper. Next paper is again the blockchain.
Dear author, please conclude your presentation as we are running out of time.
Okay. So these are the couple of papers. The last paper is the more interesting paper where they build the solution. They provide the solution on the MVC using .NET platform, and they also recommending to use the SQL database and blockchain database both. So this is what my observation, that the first block diagram which shows about the lean structure of the supply chain, where all the departments having one to other transaction going on, and more or less they are working as a silos, all that. And the next solution you can see, that is what my observation, that we are seeing that the blockchain, like all this particular department or process can be merged, can be part of a blockchain network, where the data can be traceable from first department to last department. So that's the way that traceability, data sharing, immutability, everything can be achieved with this type of model. That is what I observed, that this is the model that everyone is proposing here. That is the conclusion. Certainly, like the same that I'm talking in the similar line, that definitely blockchain is coming up as a solution or positive hope for various things, for traceability, for security, and even to maintain the transactional model, how we can use the blockchain in a very effective model. Along with blockchain, they also come up with the RFID, QR, and sensor. These are all we can add in the blockchain, and the blockchain can be more effective for data reading or the traceability or the quick accessibility to the consumer. Tampering is already, we discussed about that, immutability. So the complexity, definitely blockchain is one of the reasons that blockchain is not getting so widely adopted yet in the industry. Though there are a lot of research, a lot of solutioning is happening. One of the reason is the complexity of the implementation. So that complexity also can be reduced because they are giving the flexibility by using various technology like Microsoft.NET, Ethereum, Java, and so on. So even Node.js. So we can do any combination of the technology and we can implement that. So definitely this is what the conclusion that we can see, that blockchain definitely we can see a ray of hope for reducing the current issues in the supply chain, and that will bring more transparency in the supply chain, more security, and more performance. Next slides are the references for various papers. Yeah. Sorry for extending the timeline. Any questions so far?
You must include these references while you prepare your table, because that table is important, you know, for review purpose. So just include the authors as well as the paper journal name and everything. Just include that thing also along with the author name.
Okay. What I did, ma'am, here, that I just make here sequence 1, 2, 3, 4 in the references, and the authors also are mentioned in this particular table. That way I try to.
You can do that, because that is very essential. Nobody will see your table and then go to the references section.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah. This suggestion is taken.
Yes.
Any more question?
So basic question, what are the limitations of blockchain?
Limitation of blockchain, I would say, there is no barrier on the technology to be used. There are nothing that we can really cannot achieve with blockchain. But I can say that complexity is one of the area where the people can be on the back foot. Another area is that while implementing this blockchain-based solution, then the entire process needs to be like change from their traditional way of implementation to this new way of implementation. That's why the adoption could be less on that. But so far on blockchain technology, I don't recall immediately any limitation on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So move forward for our next presenter. Abhishek Mutta, and his paper title is UAV system using convolutional neural network, angel prediction model.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. So my so my current topic is UAV system using convolutional neural network. I am a final year BTech student from MIT Pune, and I have worked on this project from last 2 years. Worked on different technologies in the drones, and which has been interacted with the technology that is neural networks using specific in convolutional neural network. And that the first first diagnostics that was taken place was angle predictional model. So basic introduction. This idea that came back was that whenever a drone used to fly, so there are many degree of freedoms in which it used to fly, like in front, x-axis, y-axis, and its z-axis. That is known as like yaw, pitch, and roll. So basically, consisting of all the 4 directions, the drone can move in any particular direction and needed specific angle in order to turn in specific direction. So for that, different cameras or different sensors were interpreted, but there is certain limitations with these sensors that the GPS cannot be used indoor because it's not a it is not a neo GPS. It's a basic GPS which needs to be in outdoor situation. So the GPS sensor cannot be used indoor, as well as different other sensors would only give a predictive analysis. So I have designed a certain software through which, using the convolutional neural network algorithm, it could easily interact with the drone, and with the help of only the camera, it would directly predict which direction it should move in which direction it should move, whether in the left direction or whether in the right direction. So this was one of the thing which was been simulated using Udacity simulator. Second, I'll show in the diagram. Like this is basically a drone. So drone takes the recorded drone values that it's been taken place on its onboard computing. Then it has been conquered with its camera. So after concluding with the camera, there are particular amount of data sets that is first only present inside the drone, that is in the straight direction, left and right direction. So that data set is first only fed inside the drone's memory, and with the help of convolutional neural network, it would able to command like in which direction the drone should move, whether in the left or right in front direction. So first it takes the data from the camera, then it navigates the envelope that is the present in the data set, whether this image has been working, it's been predicted towards right or left. So that has been achieved with the help of convolutional neural network. So I have used around 3 pooling layers and 2 convoluted layer because the main focus should be that of a drone, that it should only direct towards a plane surface, not towards the wall of the surfaces. So with the direction of the plane surfaces, it could directly proceed further, whether it should go in straight, left or right. So after that, I have used 2 regression models to get the flatten the overall data set, and then to get the predictive whether it should go in the certain directions. So after that, it will predict which yaw direction should be taken place. Yaw is basically in a drone in which the drone could move in left or right direction. That is known as yaw movement in a drone. So if there is certain errors, like if because this model was not yet trial on the overall system, because it was designed only for the software simulation, but in overall system, when we done on the software, there was around 1000 to 2000 number of predictions that was taken place, and after that certain number of errors were generated. So that errors were again concluded inside the regressor model. And with that regressor model, it was able to correct its yaw direction and increase its accuracy, rather than again computing towards all the data from the CNN engine. Then that I have explained about the methodology. So basically, the methodology in which we have worked for the drone was having convolutional neural network, having its 5 step in order to reduce the pixel density and get to focus over the main data that was basically the flattened areas. So with the help of that flattened areas, we were able to predict what was the direction towards it and was able to get out what was able to get out from the other residual information that was present on the image. So we have used in backpropagation, we have used the mean square error method because there are several other methods that could be implemented. But the mean square error is basically a faster method in order to get the average out overall equation and to get a average value through which it could easily average the overall errors of it. So because of the averaging overall errors, the data that was getting out was getting into its predictable higher manner. So this was the angle prediction model that was taken place by the simulator. So first one was the steering angle. So this was the data that was recorded whenever the software was telling that in which direction the data was taken. So we can see the peak points of the data where the peak points have been generated. So that is basically the errors. It should be averaging in the center of the loop, whereas the other data that was getting in, that was certainly getting averaged out. So for this peak data, the backpropagation technique was used, and the overall that the data was present was get it smoothened completely in the point of the in the point of the contact. Other than that, this was the simulation image that you can see that further the road is waiting to get turned. So there will be a certain direction in which the road in which the drone would follow the line, because this image has been cropped down, because after CNN the image gets reduced and it only focuses on the flattened area. So we can see only the road other than the images that was present in that. So we can only see the road, and by that thing it was able to predict that whether it should go in front, left or right direction. Overall, the accuracy of the model was around 78%, but still it's under consideration because it needs to be tested in the real world situation also. So conclusion is basically with the help of with the help of the neural network engines, we are able to predict the direction for the drones. And in future, whenever there will be a drone aerial mapping taking place, this technology would help into directly propagate whether the drone should have its direction. Means it could have an added advantage over the drone to know whether the CNN is correctly working and giving the other sensors and other combining with the other data of the sensor, it will give more accurate results in it. So I have around 10 references, but this were the two most important references through which I was able to manage to learn about more about CNN and image databases. Thank you. So any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. I have one question.
Yes.
What could be the outcome if instead of CNN, if you could use RNN?
So if we would use RNN, so I have analyzed before using CNN and RNN. CNN is more accurate towards the image processing, whereas recurrent neural networks is more means it is higher than CNN, but so like our knowledge was enveloped towards CNN only because it's more predictable towards the image processing. So over RNN, CNN will be better at that point.
Okay, try to explore if possible. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thanks.
Ruchi ma'am, have any question for present?
No, sir, not.
Okay, so we move forward for next presenter. Our next presenter is Sonal Mobarwai. Her paper title is Achieving Sustainable Village Development Through Geoinformation Application.
Good evening, everyone. I'm trying to share my screen. Just let me know if this PPT is visible. Yes?
Yes, it is visible.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
Make
you.
it
Good
full
evening.
screen.
Yeah, I'll just make it full screen. Very good evening to everyone present online. The chair, I don't know why it's not taking as, yeah, here it is. So thank you for this opportunity to share my research here. I'm working with National Institute of Rural Development in Panchayati Raj, and this paper is part of my research project. It's more of an interdisciplinary project, which I did with my team. The title of the paper is Achieving Sustainable Village Development Through Geoinformation Application. I'll just walk you through my presentation and try to make it brief because of the time constraints. So in the idea of this whole research was drawn from Article 243G along with Mission Antyodaya, wherein the government has enlisted 29 subjects under Schedule 11, in which the states are mandated to endow the panchayats with power and responsibilities for preparation and implementation of plan for economic development and social justice. So what the government is trying to do is to reach out to the last mile. So under these 29 subjects, all the basic indicators have been covered. So our idea in this project was to map the entities and to see what would they help in. So here in the project, we are using mapping as in to mean geotagging and marking the spatial entities or features on the map. So we collected entities that were infrastructure related, such as schools, the health centers. So it's a village actually. So we had the primary school, high school, the primary health center, the common properties such as the panchayat houses, etc., the resources, the roads, and the geographical areas had agriculture lands, barren lands, water bodies, etc. The idea was to identify clusters of development to see why a panchayat is lagging behind in certain indicators and what could be done to make the village development plan more fruitful in the coming years, and to view the comprehensive village profile on a dashboard. So the basic idea, I'm basically an anthropologist and my colleague comes from geoinformation. So we tried to see how GIS could be combined here. So it was adopted as a tool for analyzing and integrating the spatial and non-spatial data and to come up with integrated spatioeconomic planning framework. The methodology, I would just take 2 minutes here to talk about the methodology because it was more so an interdisciplinary research project. So both qualitative and quantitative approaches were used for the study. We took data from Mission Antyodaya and Census 2011. We had open data kit forms designed by us through which we were collecting household data as well as pictures and videos. And we were also geotagging the same. So as in, for example, we have MG Narega scheme, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, which actually gives some funds to the panchayats to come up with, say, toilets or some other infrastructure assets. So we went physically to the village, we did some ethnographic study there and tried to map the same through geotagging. We also collected, we used interview schedules and questionnaires, and data was collected from government officials working at village level, and household level data was also collected to understand the socioeconomic structure of the village in question. The ODK forms were actually very helpful and fruitful because we could take data at the back end in Excel sheets, and subsequently we could draw some insights. And finally, we created an interactive dashboard to monitor the performance indicators. So the study area was Burgula. It's a panchayat in Farrukhnagar Mandal. Just I'm from Hyderabad here. So it's just say 80 kilometers, 100 kilometers in the periphery. And it is one of the adopted villages by NIRD under the scheme where the government gave funds to NIRD to make sure that it comes out as a developed village. But we see that while I started this study, Burgula Panchayat itself was divided into 6 parts, so to say 6 villages, namely Burgula, Chintaguda, Kasireddygura, Nerala Cheruvu, Kadiyalkunda Tanda, and Kundalkunda Tanda. And the Tandas here in Hyderabad, I mean in Telangana, refer to tribal areas. So it's a mix of population where we have the mainstream population as well as tribal hamlets as well. So this was our study area. So finally, why do we want to integrate GIS with the social aspects? And finally, the GPDP, which the government is talking about, we come up with Gram Panchayat Development Plan or Village Development Plan. So the idea is to help us in plan formulation by geotagging or georeferencing of the location, identifying suitable sites for creation of new amenities, visualization of approved works, spatial trends in GPDP plans, and management of assets and infrastructures like roads, hand pumps. So where to construct what asset could be easily decided by the village people once we have the dashboard in front of them. So therein comes the concept of decision support system, which helps in land holding analysis, health services analysis, social strata and eligibility analysis, education analysis, and available financial amenities analysis. So through these particular indicators, various resources could be allocated properly and decisions could be made at panchayat level. Also, if we look at the natural resource management, one could see what is to be done with various types of land, say agriculture or wasteland or watershed management, how to go about, building new areas and constructing new assets, or how to manage the groundwater potential, or how to do the water resource management. So all this could be done under GPDP when GIS is integrated. So this is what we attempted in this project here. So the results were, the study team took all the 141 indicators in the 29 sectors and created a real-time interactive dashboard for easy monitoring, evaluation, and dissemination of data. I'm not listing all the 141 indicators, but then these are a couple of the few that I mentioned here: agriculture, land improvement, minor irrigation, animal husbandry, fisheries, social forestry, minor forest produce, and the list actually goes on. It talks about schools, it talks about soil centers, it talks about availability of primary health centers, so and so forth, which are related to the development and grassroots level. So I have in my paper, though I've gone in detail, but for the presentation, I've confined myself only to a few indicators. So as you can see, I've kept a screenshot from my application here. So we have developed this particular application in which the it is drawn inspired by the Mission Antyodaya program. And as you can see, we have kept the legend as suggested by the government, in which the red talks about the critical areas, the yellow is hinting towards moderate achievements, and the green one shows that it has been fully developed. And the sectors, these are the indicators that we have covered. The agriculture is the first one, and then we drop down and see all the 141 indicators. And we have also created certain thematic layers. We have come up with spatial analysis, special action plans, and finally we also have a dashboard. So I'll just walk you through the dashboard as well. In this slide, we are talking about agriculture per se. So India depends on agriculture, and 69.9% of population is engaged with agriculture in the economy when we see. So in this figure, what we see is we have taken an example of availability of seed center, but then we see that it is partially as in it was not fully functional, and that is also available only in one village, that is Kasi Reddy Guda, and the other Tandas and other villages do not have the availability of a very important indicator of development, that is a government seed center. So that was amiss. So once this is put on map and told to the people who are living in this cluster, it becomes more easy to convince them to plan certain things for the upcoming 5-year plans and so. So similarly,
Dear author, sorry to interrupt you, but you have last 2 minutes. Please conclude.
Yeah, sure, I'll do that. Thank you. So similarly, I have put screenshots here which talk about availability of one thing or another: soil testing center, drinking water availability. So under the piped, under the mission Kakatiya and all, they have been able to connect all the households and come up with piped tap water. So as you can see, all villages in the cluster show green. That means all the households are connected with piped tap water. So we've also come up with thematic layers which included assets, cadastral maps, drainage pattern, MG Narega assets, and the idea was to help in understanding the needs and gaps areas of the village. So this is just an example. As you can see, the blue rings under the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, there are certain norms that a school should be, a primary school should be in the radius of 3 kilometers in the cluster, and a high school should be in 5 kilometers of the distance. So through this mapping, through spatial analysis, we could see that yes, all the villages were having a primary school, and so it was not a matter of concern for the future planning. Similarly, this is the screenshot of our interactive performance management dashboard, in which you can see we have collected household data and for each cluster. And if you click on each, it's a real-time dashboard. So if you click on religion, you click on community, all these pie charts would show how much is the percentage of population with each of these indicators engaged with these, or each of these indicators. So it's a more of a real-time interactive dashboard here. So I'll finally come to the conclusions. Through this study, the authors have made an attempt to map a panchayat, engage the community members, assess their needs, and it was more so of a crowdsourcing. We talked to them, we understood their needs, and then tried to help them with future planning based on GIS-based application and what are the benefits drawn from its usage. And we also helped in creating decision support system for the panchayats and giving them a hand holding. We conducted workshops for village development plans so that they could, understand what is the green color indicating, and there would be a sort of, we called all the sarpanches and they could relate that, okay, my panchayat is showing green and yours is showing red. So they could, plan further of how to use the money that comes in through the government interventions. The interactive dashboard created by the authors helps in performance analysis and management. And the attempt is to provide cost-effective solution for utilization of resources and maximization of benefits. As we see, because the government has been very critical about development at grassroots level, and the current government is also wanting to make sure that people on the margins are developed and enjoying the fruits of development. So this is just an attempt from our research project that we are trying to make sure that, okay, let us see and identify the gap areas and help the government perform better. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's it. I hope I didn't take much time. Yes. Any questions, any comments?
It's a good project. Basically, the idea is good. From how long you are associated with this project?
It's been just 1.5 years. Just before COVID, we completed it, and during COVID we could not cover some of the areas which were still. I mean, I wanted to include a couple of more indicators regarding tribals, but because of the COVID, we could not visit the place.
So how you have implemented this GIS? Have you used any tool, or
yes,
you have created this GIS based?
Yeah, we have used.
Interface.
Yes, ma'am. So we have used QGIS software, and we have also used a couple of free and open softwares. My team members used those to create these interactive dashboards, and the screenshots that you see is part of the application. So it's we call it an application as of now. So we've still not named it anything. We have a IP number, so it could be seen through that. Yeah.
Yeah, because you can get a patent of that thing. Huh?
I haven't thought of it. Yeah.
Yes, you can work over it and you can apply for that.
Okay, that's that. Thank you for that compliment. I'll definitely see if it can be worked out.
Yes.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah.
That's all from my side.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. Yeah.
Prashant, if you have any questions for present.
No question, but my best wishes to her. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, so before our closing, sincerely thank all authors for their excellent presentation in this session, and all our participants for being a part of this international conference. I hope this session was informative enough. All the presenters will be getting their digital certificate through email within 2 working days. Further, all papers I already forwarded to the speaker. The publication will be live within 5 to 6 months. Kindly cooperate with the team ICT 486 2021. To thank our session chair, Dr. Prashant Gupta and Suchi Nanda for chairing the session. I request our team to quickly token of appreciation. This is for Ma'am Suchi ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
For Prashant sir. Thank you for your valuable presence, sir. And
Thank you, Harsh. It was nice listening to all the presentation. I wish you good luck for the future endeavors. Thank you very much.
now, dear all, I kindly request all to on the camera for a quick snapshot the virtual conference. Thank you. Stay safe and take care. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks.